Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and the path of compassionate degrowth if we are to face the problem head on and have any chance of averting catastrophe. And that is very slim given all the factors that we already know. I'm going to start adding that to my intro spiel, compassionate degrowth, mainly for me, as just a reminder. I know it's, everybody has their struggles with their emotions around this, and some people are more outspoken or more angry, or maybe vengeful in their thinking around this. I am prone to those emotions myself, but I also try and look for better ways, higher ways in which, levels of higher consciousness at which I can meet this problem and meet other people who are in denial or struggling with this information, because it's a struggle for many. There are so many things that I have to cover tonight. I probably won't be able to cover them all. Speaking of struggling with the information, this is from the New York Times, and I believe it was covered in a few other outlets, the same study or info. Global warming concerns rise among Americans. A new poll. I've never seen jumps in some of the key indicators like this, said lead researchers. A record number of Americans understand that climate change is real, according to a new survey, and they are increasingly worried about its effects in their lives today. Some 73% of Americans polled late last year said that global warming was happening. The report found a jump of 10 percentage points from 2015 and 3 points since last March. The rise in the number of Americans who say global warming is personally important to them was even sharper, jumping 9 percentage points since March to 72%, another record over the past decade. The survey is the latest in a series from a Yale program on climate change communication and the George Mason University Center for Climate Change Communication. It was conducted online in November and December by Ipsos, which polled 1,114 Americans. I believe that it's going to be, there is a tipping point, not just in climate change, but there is a tipping point in awareness. And thankfully, moving on to the next story, thankfully we have actual politicians speaking about the truth of our situation. This is from Fox News, the Fox News website. Ocasio-Cortez calls climate change our World War II, warns the world will end in 12 years. Well, so they went a little overboard on the headline there on old foxnews.com. Warns the world will end in 12 years. I think what she was trying to say was we have 12 years to deal with the problem. Ocasio-Cortez spoke out on Monday about the urgency to take on climate change, comparing it to World War II. Speaking at an event commemorating Martin Luther King Day, Ocasio-Cortez expressed how the issue of climate change is a generational issue that younger people are more focused on. Why wouldn't they be? Millennials and people, Gen Z and all these folks that will come after us are looking up, and we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change, and your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it, Ocasio-Cortez said. I guess she did say the world's going to end, which is closer to the truth than probably anybody wants to admit. At least anybody publicly wants to admit. The Democratic Socialists said fight against climate change is war, and it's our World War II. Heady words from AOC. So they go on and on about it. This is written with the intent of inciting derision, which, if you read the comments, it's ridiculous. Don't read the comments. Whatever you do, I'm going to link this below. But anyways, gives enough actual information in this article to get the point across. Next, quickly from The Guardian, David Attenborough tells Davos, the Garden of Eden is no more. Sir David Attenborough has warned that the Garden of Eden is no more. I wanted to cover this yesterday in the live chat, but I did not have a chance. That's why this was in the title of the live chat. But I didn't get a chance to talk about it, as he urged political and business leaders from around the world to make a renewed push to tackle climate change before the damage is irreparable. And that's all you need to know. All you need to know is that they all know. They all know. And they have known for a long time. The oil companies, the fossil fuel industry has known for a very long time. The government has known for a very long time. The military has known for a very long time. I don't know what else to tell you. So I wanted to get into these two articles by two writers that I respect very much. And the meat of this video will be first from Way Past What the Fuck, from Michael Campy, a new edition this week. And this is titled, Make It What You Do. Starting with a quote from Chip Conrad. You are not anyone. You are someone. As someone, you are not just anyone. You are everyone. I was talking to a friend a few years back before joining the Doomer ranks, and I told him that I was having trouble attracting a client base. I asked him how he had developed his practice. He said it was a simple two-step process. Step one is to pick a time that you want to train, and step two is to tell anyone you meet that they can come and train too. He told me that this can have only two possible outcomes. One, no one comes and you get to work out. Two, people come and you get to train them. Either way, he came out on top. I have been trying over the last several months to follow that process with people who understand the nature of what we are threatened with and realize the importance of community. So far, these attempts have been unsuccessful. I have called, emailed, and posted on Faceogram groups, all to no avail. It would appear that community is no longer a priority in our lives if it requires that we actually go out and talk to real people. It's difficult at best for me. For all the supposed benefits of interacting online, I am finding it to be a pale comparison to real life encounters. I find myself pining away for the time before the interwebs, when people got together or called or went out or started clubs or just hung out. I am sure that there may be friendships formed in the digital arena, but unless there is some actual face-to-face time, it seems kind of hollow. Chip Conrad said in his book, Are You Useful?, that awareness by any name is a dying art, since our virtual world is destroying all of it. The illiterates of the next century are those who cannot participate in real life. They can read words, but their comprehension of real life will straight up suck. There's a lot to say about that. Awareness of your immediate surroundings is a vital part of any community. If you have ever looked up from your device or devices at Starbucks, you will have noticed that the majority of people in there have no idea what is going on around them. Being aware of what is going on in your environment is a crucial part of a community. If you know what is happening in your neighborhood, if you are aware of changes in the natural world, you will be much more likely to band together with others that are aware and work to improve or defend that neighborhood. When the time comes, and I don't believe, based on what just happened in Zimbabwe, that it is too far off. When the time comes, and I don't believe that it is too far off, the only things you will have is your community. If I were to ask how many people you could gather together right now to work towards a common end, what would you say? I'm not talking about people you go to the movies with, but people that you could rely on to pull their weight and have your back and support each other. Can't say for sure, but I'm guessing that it would be a short list. You can prove this to yourself by letting it be known that you are moving and need help. I would think that a fair percentage of your friends would be out of town that weekend, and you can bet that none of your Facebook friends will be around. The internet has limited our ability to interact with live humans. We have more decontextualized information than ever before, but our ability to utilize that information in a meaningful way has deteriorated. Very true. C.A. Bowers, in his 2014 book, The False Promises of the Digital Revolution, said, there are many ways that sorry, I'm losing it. Digitally mediated, that is primarily computer mediated, thought and communication reinforce a form of consciousness that is radically different from that found in cultures where the spoken word is the primary basis of thought and communication. As we drift more towards digital interaction and away from face-to-face encounters, we lose the subtleties of an actual conversation, the body language, the facial expressions, and what is created between two people when they sit down and talk. Native populations had an oral culture. The food they ate, the shelters they built, the things that were important to the survival of the tribe were all passed on orally. This information had a pretty much one-to-one information-action ratio. The things you learned and internalized were things that would help you survive and flourish in your area. Sebastian Junger said in Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging that we have a strong instinct to belong to small groups defined by clear purpose and understanding. Tribes. The tribal connection has been largely lost in modern society, but regaining it may be the key to our psychological survival. There is a lot of talk these days about tribes. Groups separated by vast distances call themselves a tribe. The fitness community, particularly the outdoor gurus, call themselves a tribe, but they are missing a crucial element in that they are not banded together in a single location, and there is no clearly stated purpose or goal. A tribe is a group of people that can act as one entity for the betterment of all. They function as a unit. They laugh and love and cry and fight together. There is no I, only we. There is no possibility of this being recreated in a digital environment. Digital groups may be banded together by a shared interest, but there is not a shared purpose. Purpose is a baseline element. In order for a group to prosper, the entire group must have a reason to exist. Absent this purpose, you can have a bunch of people who are interested in the same thing but not really have a community. The importance of having around you a group of people that you can rely on cannot be overstated. To that end, I am working on finding a venue where we can gather on a regular basis. So, step 1, a time, 11 a.m., a date, first and third Sundays of each month, a place, Pasadena, California, venue to be announced. Step 2, I will be there starting February 3rd. Possible outcomes. 1, I get to enjoy a coffee and a pastry. 2, I get to enjoy a coffee, a pastry, and the pleasure of your company. The purpose will be to talk, commiserate, and plan for what we know is going to happen. I hope to see you there. Thank you. Excellent. As always, from Michael, and I will actually be there as well. If you are in the LA area or Pasadena area, we will be meeting at a yet decided coffee shop. Just to let you know. Moving on to an article from Chris Hedges from TruthDig. But first, let me take a sip of this fine cup of joe. It's not that fine. It's actually kind of old, but it's warm, so that's okay. So this is from TruthDig. This is from yesterday, and the title is Confronting the Culture of Death. The issue before us is death. Not only our individual death, which is more imminent for some of us this morning than others, but our collective death. We have begun the 6th great mass extinction driven by our 150-year binge on fossil fuel. The litany of grim statistics is not unfamiliar to many of you. We are pouring greenhouse gases into the atmosphere at 10 times the rate of the mass extinction known as the Great Dying, which occurred 252 million years ago. The glaciers in Alaska alone are losing an estimated 75 billion tons of ice every year. The oceans, which absorb over 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, are warming and acidifying, melting the polar ice caps and resulting in rising sea levels and oxygen-starved ocean dead zones. We await a 50 gigaton burp or pulse of methane from thawing Arctic permafrost on the East Siberian Arctic shelf, which will release about 2/3 of the total carbon dioxide pumped into the atmosphere since the beginning of the industrial era. Sounds like Chris is pretty well informed on what is happening. Some 150 to 200 species of plant, insect, bird, and mammal are going extinct every 24 hours, 1,000 times the natural or background rate. This pace of extinction is greater than anything the world has experienced since the disappearance of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. This pace, the rate of extinction. Ultimately, feedback mechanisms will accelerate the devastation, and there will be nothing we can do to halt obliteration. Past mass extinctions on Earth were characterized by abrupt warming of 6 to 7 degrees Celsius. We are barreling towards those numbers. The mathematical models for this global temperature rise predict an initial 70% die-off of the human species, culminating with total death. The corporate forces that have commodified the natural world for profit have also commodified human beings. We are as expendable to global corporations as the barrier reef or the great sequoias. These corporations and ruling elites, which have orchestrated the largest transference of wealth upward in human history, with globe's richest 1% owning half the world's wealth, kneel and force us to kneel before the dictates of the global marketplace. They have seized control of our governments, extinguishing democracy, corrupting law, and building alliances with neo-fascists and authoritarians as the ruling ideology of neoliberalism is exposed as a con. They have constructed pervasive and sophisticated systems of internal security, wholesale surveillance, and militarized police, along with criminalizing poverty to crush dissent. These corporate capitalists are the modern versions of the Canaanite priests who served the biblical idol Moloch. This is interesting that he brings up Moloch. If anybody, I'm sure quite a few of you understand what's going on with, or what's said or insinuated to be going on with quite a number of elites, which demanded child sacrifice. And as in this ancient Canaanite religion, it is our children who are being sacrificed to these mute idols, as 1 Corinthians puts it. I think he means figuratively, but I think others believe that literally they are being sacrificed. I have a strong belief that that is actually going on. Their future is being taken away from them. These corporate forces are, in biblical terms, forces of death. They will, unchecked, create more human misery and death than the evils of Nazism and Stalinism combined. Actually, I hardly feel constrained to try and make head or tail of this condition of the world, Walter Benjamin wrote. On this planet, a great number of civilizations, let me go back and just say he meant figuratively as in the future, children will be sacrificed. Our children's future will be sacrificed, but literally they will be sacrificed eventually. Anyways, on this planet, a great number of civilizations have perished in blood and horror. Naturally, one must wish for the planet that one day it will experience a civilization that has abandoned blood and horror. In fact, I am inclined to assume that our planet is waiting for this. Yes, but it is terribly doubtful whether we can bring such a present to its 100 or 400 millionth birthday party. And if we don't, the planet will finally punish us, its unthoughtful well-wishers, by presenting us with the Last Judgment. Religious belief, to be relevant, must be grounded in this concrete and bitter human reality. It must name radical evil, not as an amorphous theological concept, but as Christ did when he named the evils of the rich, the Pharisees, and the Roman Empire. It must eschew self-preservation, for only he who loses his life can save it. In the mortal struggle against the forces of death, it must speak in a negative, critical voice like the Hebrew prophets. Condemning the dominant corporate culture. The point of faith is not to give us hope. It is to name and defy the forces of death. Faith is not centered around the question, how is it with me? This is part of the narcissism of the dominant culture. Faith does not reside in infantile fantasies about inevitable human progress or personal schemes for unachievable happiness. Faith defies magical thinking. It defies our cultural and historical amnesia. It is the counterweight to the conditioned helplessness peddled by mass culture, the flight from reality that ensures our capitulation and our immolation on the altar of Moloch. Faith, finally, is about the belief, as Daniel Berrigan once told me, that the good draws to it the good, even if all the empirical evidence around us says otherwise. We demand justice, not because we will win, but because we must. Corporate culture, like all cultures of death, makes war on love, truth, justice, and beauty, and numbs us to the questions about the search for meaning and the struggle to face our mortality. It spreads the dark viruses of hedonism, sexual sadism, greed, the cult of the self, the lust for power, hypermasculinity, and the glorification of violence. It seeks to crush the transcendent. It lacks the capacity for empathy, awe, and reverence. It is the enemy of the sacred. Nothing in life has an intrinsic value beyond a monetary value in this culture of death. All living entities are herded toward Moloch's altar. The only ethical and religious response is to smash the idols and drive the high priest from Moloch's temple. The nothingness into which the West is sliding is not the natural end, the dying, the sinking of a flourishing community of peoples, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote in Ethics. Instead, it is again a specifically Western nothingness, a nothingness that is rebellious, violent, anti-God, and anti-human. Breaking away from all that is established. It is the utmost manifestation of all the forces opposed to God. It is nothingness as God. No one knows its goals or its measure. Its rule is absolute. It is a creative nothingness that blows its anti-God breath into all that exists, creates the illusion of waking it to a new life, and at the same time sucks out its true essence until it too disintegrates into an empty husk and it is discarded. Life, history, family, people, language, faith, the list could go on forever because nothingness spares nothing. All fall victim to nothingness. Religion, as H. Richard Niebuhr wrote, is a good thing for good people and a bad thing for bad people. And religion, as seen in the Christian right, which articulates and promotes white supremacy and Christian fascism, now rapidly filling Donald Trump's ideological void, is anti-religious. The idol of a personal God, one that caters to and promotes the interests of those who profess homage to it, is the idolatry of Moloch. Good point, Chris. It is self-worship. It is heretical. And one of the most egregious failures of the liberal church has been its refusal to denounce these Christian heretics. The tacit toleration of these Christian heretics gave them religious legitimacy. You do not need to, as I did, spend 3 years at Harvard Divinity School to understand that Jesus did not come to make us rich, did not bless the white race above the other races. Jesus, after all, was a person of color. It was the Romans who were white, or sanctify the American empire's dropping of iron fragmentation bombs for 18 years up and down the Middle East. This is the theology of the Antichrist, as we hear in the reading this morning from the book of John. It speaks only to itself. Woo, deep stuff by Chris Hedges. Those we battle as the society and the ecosystem disintegrate will increasingly appropriate the language of religion. They will seek to sanctify evil. These Christian fascists, like all idol worshippers, endow themselves with absolute power and authority. They claim to speak and act for God. They externalize evil. Evil for them is not the constant struggle to combat the dark forces within our own hearts, but is embodied in the demonized other Muslims, immigrants, blacks, feminists, artists, intellectuals, or homosexuals. And once the other is eradicated, evil itself will somehow miraculously be eradicated. Except, of course, it won't. And these Manichaeans will, in frustration, oppress and kill new groups of demonized human beings with an even greater fury. These beliefs, common to all fundamentalists, who can come in secular form, as we see with the new atheists, are the ideological cover for an emerging dystopia. So We will endure only by inverting the world's values. To resist radical evil saves us, as Soren Kierkegaard wrote, from slipping into that loathsome void, that torment of despair. Hope comes by way of defeat. When we pit ourselves against the culture of death, and this means performing acts of civil disobedience and non-compliance, it means becoming an outlaw in the eyes of the corporate state, then suffering and even death does not have the last word. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I think I'm messing that up, Solzhenitsyn, in the Gulag Archipelago, I can't speak tonight for whatever reason. The Gulag Archipelago describes prisoners in his camp organizing a work stoppage and hunger strike. He writes, what the bosses would do, no one could predict. We thought that perhaps they would start firing on the huts again from the towers. The last thing we expected was any concession. We had never in our lives wrested anything from them, and our strike had the bitter tang of hopelessness. But there was a sort of satisfaction in this feeling of hopelessness. We had taken a desperate step. It could only end badly, and that was good. Our bellies were empty, our hearts were in our boots, but some higher need was being satisfied. During those long, hungry days, evenings, nights, 3,000 men brooded over their 3,000 sentences, their families, their lack of families, all that had befallen and would yet befall them. And although the hearts and thousands of breasts could not beat together, and there were those who felt only regret, only despair, yet most of them kept time. Things are as they should be. We'll keep it up to spite you. Things are bad, so much the better. The struggle to nurture and protect life, the sacred, has always been empiric. But it is our call, the cross we are commanded to carry. It is what makes us human. It is what sustains the dim, absurd compassion and human kindness. Love itself, which evil, with its machines and bureaucratic power, its armies, its lies, its industrial violence, its wealth, and its vast megaphones, has never been able to crush and never will. It may not be a battle we can win, but by fighting it, we sustain ourselves. We are enveloped and absolved by the sacred, by God. We make faith possible. The poet Linda Gregg writes in Chosen by the Lion poems, in the museum print room today, we looked at their Blake engravings. All were about a place that was not paradise. Everybody suffering, men on their backs, their faces upside down and exposed, legs raised and merging with the lines that meant a mountain. Women, unusually large, stood composed, discerning, concerned over the general conditions of life. The curator said, he cut directly into the metal, then inked it. I said, yes, she said. There was a spiral of mist filled with the shapes of lovers. I looked close to see if any were happy. At least two were, and in the sky, a couple sitting, embracing. Something weeps in me all the time, all the time. I said at random, wouldn't it be nice if one of these prints showed an angel crossing the border between heaven and this other realm, just the border? Jesus, you who are above all others. I hurt constantly inside, bleared with loneliness, exhausted by keeping what I love safe. And that is a quite epic article from Chris Hedges. Epic not in length, but in content. Let's see if I have anything else for you today. I might have one more article I wanted to touch on. Maybe not. Oh, yes. This also. This is from December 29th, 2018. Greenland is melting even in winter, and Canada's glaciers are terminally warm. Cold weather is usually good for ice and Earth's cryosphere, except it's just not cold enough anymore. Even in a year of bad news for the environment and for cold weather climates specifically, this week's lineup of new revelations about the effects of Earth's warming temperatures was a doozy. Let's review. Greenland's ice is now melting even in winter, hundreds of meters below the ocean surface. Giant waves of warm water are surging up into Greenland's fjords. coming in contact with the ice sheet and causing melting even in winter, according to a paper published this week by a team from the Scottish Association for Marine Science and Johns Hopkins University. The warm water is only a few degrees above freezing, but it's enough to cause melting on the sheet from below. Neil Fraser, an ocean physicist with the Scottish Association for Marine Science and lead author on the paper, told the BBC. The waves are pushed toward Greenland by strong winter winds over the northeast Atlantic. It's a perfect storm scenario. He said, Greenland's ice sheet is the biggest in the world after Antarctica's. Ice melt in Greenland is responsible for 20% of the increase in sea level rise each year. And this is just a litany of melting glaciers. Western Canada's glaciers only have a few decades left. In 2015, researchers predicted that the glaciers of Alberta and British Columbia could shrink 70% by 2100 compared to their 2005 sizes. Now, the prognosis looks a little bit worse. A new State of the Mountains report published this week found that 80% of mountain glaciers in Western Canada will disappear in the next 50 years. And as things happen faster than expected, or at exponential rates of increase, I'm sure that timeline will change very soon. The American West is losing its snow since 1982. The maximum snowpack in some parts of the American West has gotten as much as 41% smaller. According to a paper published this week by researchers at the University of Arizona and the Idaho Power Company, they found that figure by mapping changes to snowpack over the contiguous U.S. by breaking up the area into a 2.5 mile by 2.5 mile pixels. Snowpack is declining in the West overall, but 41% was the maximum shrinkage. If all the areas that had the 41% reduction in the snow were added up, there would be enough land to cover North Carolina. Not good. More evidence that we are entering uncharted territory. We already are in uncharted territory, but we are entering quickly changing uncharted territory, and it won't. Things will look very different sooner than people expect. I'm afraid. I don't want that to be true. I'm not, sitting around like, oh, I can't wait till everybody's, having a hard time. That's not something that's in my heart. It's just an unfortunate truth that very much sooner than later, we're going to have some big problems on our hands. So, word to those who maybe might not believe or not want to believe, at the very least, prepare yourself. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.